Do you suffer from an autoimmune condition? Take all the meds, still not feeling great? Well, I am hosting a masterclass on February 23rd at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and I am talking all about what triggered your autoimmune condition. And so we're going to be diving really deep into this. It's super important. It's all the things that I look for with my own patients to uncover what actually triggered the autoimmune condition, and then we can easily reverse that. So join me, link in bio, margaretromero.com/triggers. Sign up February 23rd, 7 p.m. Eastern, and I will see you then. Welcome to the Sacred Medicine Podcast. My name is Margaret Romero. I'm a Columbia-trained functional medicine nurse practitioner, and here I uncover the truth behind chronic illness so that you can finally heal. I'm a women's health and hormone expert and love empowering women to finally live their life fully and powerfully through optimal health. This is the Sacred Medicine Podcast. All right, we're back for another week of the Sacred Medicine Podcast. Thank you so much for joining me this week. We have a new guest, my friend, Dr. Kasia Kynes. She's the CEO and founder of the Global Epstein Barr Virus Institute, and she is a leader in recovery therapy for chronic Epstein Barr. She's an author and a wellness expert and highly respected doctor of clinical nutrition. And so today we're talking all about Epstein-Barr virus, what causes it, how do we prevent it from reactivating. Epstein-Barr, when I do labs on my patients, and I do it on all of my autoimmune patients, well, everyone actually, for that matter, everyone, I'd say 99% of my patients come back positive for Epstein-Barr, especially the women who I treat for lupus. It's astonishing. So it is closely linked. Epstein-Barr virus and lupus or other autoimmune conditions are so linked. So today you were going to learn so much about Epstein-Barr virus, what to eat, what not to eat, supplements, etc. So without further ado, on to the show. All right, we are back for another week of the Sacred Medicine Podcast, and I have an amazing guest today, Kasia Kynes. And guess what? She's talking all about Epstein-Barr virus. And majority of my patients do test positive, so this is perfect. Kasia, thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, anytime, my pleasure. And I love the name of your podcast or now video. Sacred. I love the word sacred.
I do too.
Special.
So why don't you tell us, why don't we start with why is the majority of my lupus patients, why do they test positive for Epstein-Barr? Why is there that connection?
Yeah. So number one, we know that the body is too intelligent to just trickle itself into autoimmunity. And whereas medical community will tell us, well, autoimmunity means that your body just starts attacking itself. But it suggests that it's random and it's, it just happens. No, it doesn't just happen. Something triggers it. And oftentimes, well, let's say in another autoimmunity, Hashimoto's, if an infecting agent is in thyroid tissue, then the immune cells, soldiers will go into the thyroid tissue to try to clear the attacker.
Right.
And so there's a signaling from a pathogen often, or from an environmental toxin. But these are, I would say environmental toxins are like pathogens. They create the same signaling chaos and, in the urgency of the immune system to attack. And so lupus is one of the 7 autoimmune conditions that have been shown by Dr. Harley just a few years ago in one study to be directly caused by EBV. And the way it works is And there's multiple sclerosis on the list. There's celiac on the list. Interestingly, when diabetes type 1 and S, even Crohn's and ulcerative colitis are on that list. So if your virus is in your cell, inside your cell, because that's where the virus lives, it doesn't really travel in the blood all the time. It periodically it travels, but the goal is to get inside your cells, like B cells, your immune cells.
Right.
So when the virus is in there, you have the cell, and then you have the nucleus of your cell. And in the nucleus is where we have DNA material, right? This is the coding. And so as humans, we have certain genes. In environment, we call it epigenetics. Environment can turn the genes off or on.
Right.
So we're not defined by the genes, but there's triggers for them. And so there's a protein in the virus, EBNA2. And that protein can get into that nucleus, so the virus is in the infected cell, and then that protein from the virus goes into that DNA area in the nucleus and starts messing up with your DNA. And so it can go into the DNA area coding for autoimmune conditions and turn on those genes, and lupus is one of them.
Wow. And so how does one determine, so many people get Epstein Barr virus. What causes some people for it to become lupus or MS? Is it environmental factors added on top of that?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. So depending on the condition, so let's say with lupus, I've seen some history of real environmental insults. I had a case of a woman who, when she was young, she was in kibbutz, actually, and in orchards, and the planes were spraying pesticides right over them, when they were working. And I think we're so complex, and there's so many factors. Like for MS, it can be a combination of lack of sun or lack of vitamin D, and mono in teenage age, right, for example. And then there's a combination that can trigger MS when you're adult. There's just oftentimes it's a bucket, and it's a couple of things that come together.
Right, that makes sense. Yeah. Yeah.
So let's say I had a client who was from Norway, and her mother was paranoid about the sun. She had some sun problems with the skin. And so she would literally take her daughter north in summer. And north in summer in Norway didn't have the sun hitting the skin at the right angle enough. And she would still shelter her from the sun. So in Norway, like in Poland, where I'm from, when you grow up, your parents give you cod liver oil. So, that was the source of vitamin D in winter. Cod liver oil. So this girl didn't get any of that. So it was, and she's an adult. She is a very, very challenging MS. She's still struggling with it. So it's like, you have these circumstances.
Right.
It can be a circumstance. Like in my case right now, I have mold, as you can see on my mouth. I'm still recovering from mold exposure. And so I tested my EBV first time in my life, and I do have lowest positive reactivation, probably as a result of mold, because that's an opportunity for a virus like that to actually come and play. So we are constantly surrounded by factors. And so when we work on a complex condition like lupus, we look at all these factors. There are certain patterns, and then there's individual patterns. Yeah.
So when someone knows, I test all of my patients, and I'd say a good 90% of them test positive for Epstein Barr. And what is something, and let's just say they remember being really sick many, many years ago. And if they're currently not in a reactivation, what are some things that they can do to prevent reactivation?
Well, we have a couple of big concepts. Very simple. in particular, the virus can reactivate when your nutritional status goes down.
Mm-hmm.
And why does it go down? We have studies on junk food, let's say. If you eat one big junk food meal, it's going to increase your NF-kappa B. And NF-kappa B is an inflammatory complex of proteins that EBV likes to hijack to replicate itself. So if you have junk food, you are directly turning on the replication of the virus because it can feed off that NF-kappa B.
Got it. Right.
That's an inflammatory marker. And, all the work you and I do is teaching people how to eat anti-inflammatory diet. Plain and simple, and avoid junk. But what else causes, when your nutritional status goes down, the virus becomes more virulent, meaning more aggressive.
Okay, right.
So you'll have junk food, and you have the capacity of the virus to become stronger as we start going down with the nutritional intake. So what does it mean? It means organics, because pesticide-ridden food is what you eat if you don't invest in organics. Organics is not perfect, but it has minimal pesticide burden. So that's better quality food. Also means more antioxidants. And so EBV creates massive amounts of oxidative stress, which is one of the reasons why people are so fatigued and brain foggy. And so antioxidants are in quality foods, fruits, vegetables, especially fruits, plant foods. You don't get antioxidants from animal protein. So that's not where you go. You want to be more, eating whole foods, a plant-based diet. And what is one of the biggest factors that depletes your basic nutrients? Stress. And what is the biggest reactivating factor for EBV in studies, independently of diet depletion from stress? Stress. Yeah, if you survey your community, I bet that number one story that they will tell you is, I remember when I got so sick from EBV, or I think it was EBV because I was going through a tremendous amount of personal stress. Divorce, loss of loved one, loss of career, or, trauma.
Right.
Betrayal, serious stuff. Terrible boss. These things really spiral into severe stress. And that, depletes the nutrients. Again, we're going down this way, but also the hormones of stress reactivate that virus. That's the feeding ground.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I remember when I was diagnosed in college, my gosh, I didn't know anything about anything back then. So I was eating, Domino's at 1:00 in the morning. We'd make, White Castle was opened all 24 hours a day. And so we would go there between studying. And then it was during my finals exams when I got so sick and I got tested and I was tested positive. But I wasn't sleeping. I was probably consuming alcohol at the time.
Classic.
Right, eating junk. It's just
classic.
Yeah, classic.
Yeah. And sometimes people say, during those times, like when you were a student and you got mono, let's say, how bad was it? Because for some people it was debilitating and it took weeks out.
No, I do not recall it being that debilitating. I got through my midterm exams final exams, but I remember being exhausted, but I don't recall it lasting months and months and months. No.
So you got out of it. Yeah. So you had enough capacity, the body had enough capacity to get out of that perpetuation of it, because there is a medical term called chronic mononucleosis syndrome, which means basically that, after the proverbial 6 weeks of being miserable, you're supposed to exactly go back to kind of normal like you did.
Right.
But for some people, that doesn't happen. And, next thing you know, they feel like they have chronic fatigue syndrome.
Right. Yeah, that's linked too. And so why is that happening for some people, not the other? Is it their nutritional reserves? Is it how well they've been eating? Or is it
Oh,
the
absolutely.
mitochondria?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So the backbone is nutrition. Absolutely. And stress, also your capacity to, I would say, have joy and fulfillment in your life, because that really drives the immune system. And you are more resilient. Your immune system is more resilient when you're doing what you love to do. I mean, that's basically a fact of life, I would say. But when there is this harmony, you have a bad relationship, you have a bad boss, you are doing the job that you're not supposed to be doing. These things carve deeply into how you perceive the world, yourself, how you function every single day. It's like, a little drop on a stone from the rain every day, and it carves into that stone. And so I would say that what carries us is the love affair with love, with the life, with what you do, what you came here to do.
Absolutely.
And so I think, that's what has sustained me in times of high stress and so on and so forth. Like, I am lucky, I do what I love, except where there is an external trigger like mold now. So, environmental trigger,
Right. So why don't we segue into mold, because it's everywhere. I mean, there's just, and I don't think that people really realize how bad mold is, and the mycotoxins.
Yeah, the problem that I'm having is I'm pretty upset with the craftsmanship, the disappearing craftsmanship in building practices and the building materials and the way we build houses right now. Because this is where the fault is. It's not that there's more rain, or it's not that, it's just that the way we build houses feeds the mold.
Right.
With plaster, with this is food for mold. In Poland, where I grew up, you built a long time. It was expensive, but you built brick.
Right.
And then on top of that, you have contractors, for some reason, take shortcuts. They don't do things properly. The new homes are very toxic. So when you have an autoimmunity like lupus, I would never recommend buying a brand new home and moving into it. Like, I would never recommend buying a brand new car and driving in it, because there's a lot of off-gassing. A colleague and a mentor of mine.
People love that new car smell. Meanwhile, it's so toxic.
It's very toxic, yes. And I had a mentor who actually got sick. They bought a beautiful home, brand new. I was so jealous. The kitchen was, she's a nutritionist. The kitchen was just like, oh, can I just borrow it? But 1 year into it, she got really sick. She got really compromised because of gassing. You have a lot of particle boards, the paints, there's just a lot of it. And the new homes also, I'm noticing from our community that people get sick with mold, and it's maybe not because of the materials you're building with, but the plumbing is not installed properly, and then they seal it. And then you move into a new house, and the second year into it, you have all these weird autoimmunity issues, and you don't get better. Doctors are doing all the tests, and we're looking. Or you live in the South and you constantly use AC, and you use forced air, which is the worst, and you have this recirculation. AC units, systems are notorious for growing molds.
Yes.
So it's and then the house we moved into, we were renting a beautiful, beautiful home, big windows, but the caulking on the outside of the window was done poorly. I mean, really, there were gaps, and so it was right on a mountain, the trees were below. So on the island, when you have stormy weather, we have a lot of rain in Pacific Northwest and winds on this island. The winds are very strong, and there's no trees on the same level, so the wind would hit the rain against that window. And so there was literally damage inside that window frame. That's how I got sick. So we unfortunately live in and the worst thing is, if you're building your house, you're getting a new house right now, they continue building the house in the rain before the roof is installed. So you have plaster, you have material exposed to moisture and rain. Sure. They don't seal it, they don't protect it, they keep building. And I have cases when people tell me, I just went to the side and I look at it and there's mold growing already. What are you going to do about it? Oh, we're just going to, clean it up. It's like, no, you have to replace the whole wall. I'm not going to walk into a house where all this is sealed and continues growing. You don't know that when you walk into the house, right? So unfortunately, this is our reality. Depending where you look at numbers, there's some claims that 51% of residential and commercial buildings have mold because of all and it takes is bad plumbing or leaky plumbing and not noticing it in time, and just it goes into the wall, it goes into the ceiling, and that's all you need. So it can happen.
It's in virtually the majority of schools, and children are exposed every day in and day out.
Yes. When I used to have a one-on-one practice and I work with teachers, this was a big concern. Another concern was a bus parked in front of the building with the engine on for minutes and minutes. And you would have the AC chutes right there, and it would be, the dioxins would be absorbed into the air circulation into the building. It's like, okay. We need literacy. We need environmental literacy for us, for consumers. And then how do we change the practices so contractors are actually aware and they care enough, because this is not on their radar at all, unless they have a family member who got really sick from mold.
Right, exactly.
And only 25% of population, when we get exposed, not everybody gets reactions. In my family, I'm the only one.
That's true.
25%. So you might think it's in your head, and it took a little while for my husband to also realize that this is not in my head and I'm not overreacting. But that's common in spouses, not the disbelief. Like, what are you talking about? Why am I not sick? Well, typically it's just one person in the family. 25%. You have 4 people in the family, one probably will be sick.
So are you saying that those people, like your husband, mycotoxins does nothing to them, or it just hasn't shown up yet?
I would say the damage is always there, because mycotoxins are dangerous. It's just a matter of symptoms. So for my husband, towards the months, the last month, I found that it took us 3 months. So we were not there too long. It's just that when we moved to a different place, we also had water damage from storm, and then I had to remediate here. So it's like complicated. But towards the end there, he felt he was more fatigued, which is more typical. But for me, it was extraordinary itching, burning, and and this was kind of co-infection from wearing a mask all day, and so that just made it all more complicated. Right. So I think just being aware is important when you have any autoimmunity, and if you move, just do mold inspection. Just always have a couple of hundred adults do that mold inspection and see if they find something or not, so you have peace of mind.
Yeah, my parents recently, we had the mold removed, and it was on the lower part of the wall. So it was tested, and it was just removed, and now we're going to be doing some further things down there. But my brother, as a doctor, didn't think, oh, there's not that much, and I'm like, we have no idea what's behind that wall, first of all. And even if the fact that we're actually seeing it means that it's pretty bad.
Yes, if it shows on the outside, watch out for the inside. Yes. I remember in a house we lived in Baltimore. One day we had linoleum floor in the bathroom, and there was a crack between the bathtub and the linoleum floor. And one day, a real mushroom, like a mushroom with a head and a stem, grew out of it. It looked like an edible mushroom. It's like, so when we ripped the whole bathroom off, the particle board underneath was black.
Oh my gosh.
Mushroom growing. And I'm not kidding, I Googled that and I found a lot of pictures from people online that had mushrooms growing out of carpet.
Are you kidding?
I am not kidding. I still have that little picture of it. So, I mean, mold is just a question of opportunity. I know clients that would move out of one state to another, like let's say from Maryland to Arizona because of mold. Only that I know, because we looked too. Arizona has one of the highest incidence of mold because of building practices. Because the temperature difference between the outside, it's so hot, and the inside, trying to keep it steady at a comfortable temperature. There's a lot of condensation that forms naturally inside the walls because of that difference and the building practices. So I would say, how did indigenous Indians build in this climate, right?
Right.
In the Pacific Northwest, my Andy told me that they used to put lime inside the wall because it's alkalizing and it prevents mold, and that's how you build.
Interesting.
We have building practices that are not healthy. The way we build, that's just what it is.
Right. Right. Wow. And so, I mean, it's scary when you think, well, if I can move into a new place, then older places may potentially have a high risk of mold too.
You don't know until you test. I mean,
Right.
This house was good, and then we had a storm, and then the crawling space was bad, and it flooded. There wasn't a sump pump. It was really already moldy. But what happened was we opened the floor. We were doing renovation at the same time, so we had subfloor in one corner because we removed the wet bar. And so that subfloor, there were gaps, and so the air from the crawling space was now coming into the breathable air. So I got reinfected. But that's because the crawling space had to be guarded and didn't have all the insulation and stuff. So it was seeping into the breathable air. But it's all doable, preventable, and fixable. And once you fix it, you're safe.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do have some patients that have had mold exposure.
Yeah, and it just takes a long time. Like it takes. I only have met very few people, maybe 2-3 people that have the reactions I do. Okay. And I know from last exposure, it will take probably about 8 months. Steady, slow. So my improvement is maybe 5% a month.
I see.
It's pretty slow, and it's pretty slow and frustrating, but if you remove yourself from mold, if you're sick, 24, 48 hours, you're going to see turning around like, oh, big difference. Look at that.
Right. Mm-hmm. Right.
So,
okay.
Yeah. Going back to lupus.
Going back to lupus. So I wanted to just find out a couple of things. So let's say my patient has Epstein Barr, or at least a history of, and yes, nutrition is key. Lowering stress is key. Are there any particular foods that are like amazing that they should really be focused on eating? Anything in particular?
Now you got me. One amazing food, I don't know.
So it's mostly like greens and whole foods and things like that.
Yeah, I would say
stay away from, I don't know, maybe fried foods and,
Yes.
really bad oils.
Yes, the oils are important because oils add to oxidative stress, and EBV creates a lot of oxidative stress. So good oil is important. So I would say, like olive oil is just the only thing you need. It's good quality, dark bottle, glass, small glass bottle, and you use it for anything. It's fine.
Right.
And then omega-3, instrumental, is going to be really important for the repair, cellular repair, anti-inflammatory modulation, the brain function. So it's part of our protocol, definitely. So, but I guess food is harder to get. So I would say, at this point, when you're ill, you want to supplement with omega-3. Fruits like wild blueberries, for example, papaya, they have a lot of value. I like to recommend, because people can be intimidated by kale and collard greens and all those greens, right?
Sure.
And I would be careful with kale right now. I'm not a big proponent of kale because we've seen in testing that people, and you can't control it and you can't really figure it out. So it's kind of you're going blindly into it. Kale absorbs a lot of thallium, which is toxic. And there are lots absorbs thallium. Thallium is toxic, and for some reason, kale really likes it and it absorbs it, and so you don't have a control over soil where it grew, even if it's organic. So there've been reports. I talked to a medical consultant at one of the labs that tests for it, and he says, I don't eat kale anymore. I've seen too many labs with elevated thallium, and it's typically from kale consumption, and people love it. So I would do collard greens, same family, also cabbage family, very similar properties. But what I like is less intimidating greens that are more readily available. And so you probably saw a picture in my book: basil in season, cilantro, parsley, dill wheat, green onions, those little things. They have so many benefits. They're pretty amazing. You want them organic, and you chop them, put them in a little container, and use them literally on everything, On everything. Throw them in the soup, throw them in a salad. You don't have to cook them.
How about like Swiss chard?
Swiss chard is great. Swiss chard has a lot of oxalates, so for some people it may be too much.
Yeah.
I would take those other ones over Swiss chard anytime, probably.
Okay.
Because the medicinal benefits of dill or parsley or cilantro are just, much more interesting to me clinically than chard. But there's nothing really wrong with chard. Otherwise, kale and collard greens are formidable because they are cabbage family, and that's highly protective against cancer, helps with detoxification. So it's a very different group. Cabbage family is just like a family, very important, and that is not one of them. But watercress is one of them. So watercress also is great.
Oh, yes. I've heard watercress is really amazing. Dave Asprey from Bulletproof has said that the two worst things that you can possibly eat are kale and hummus. He really stands by that. He's like, they're horrible for you. Kale. He said something like it will, how did he put it? He said, kale, they're like razors, I think, to your gut lining. Used to have a lot of kale until I started hearing that it really wasn't great. So I really have stopped. And if I do, it'll be cooked. I never will have it raw, and I never juice kale or spinach ever.
Yeah, that would be, yeah.
But I think so many people do. So many people juice kale.
Yeah, and people love it. And some people don't have problem with it, but, yeah, I have concerns with thallium. That's my number one concern.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so those were the food, decreased stress. How about a couple of supplements? Anything like that could help potentially?
if you have chronic EBV, which manifests in decreased functionality in your life and possibly also autoimmunity as a result, then food, unfortunately, may not be enough in order to really turn it off.
Right.
And so then you need an aggressive supplement protocol, because that's a different story. People can take the same supplements but not optimize them and not see with the results. We are very aggressive, and that's where you can see the needle move. So that's a whole
other thing. But that's probably more individualized, right? Everyone sort of gets their own protocol depending on where they're maybe deficient, or right? Or is there a protocol that everyone who has?
There is a basic protocol that I recommend. So in our process, we call it a recovery program, recovery program. We do have foundational, like an initial foundational protocol. And yes, people will customize it because, some people are intolerant of this or that. There's contraindications or medications that you have to be careful with, all that.
Exactly.
So, but I like to start with that because it's a great barometer. It's all based on medical studies. It's all based on what I saw in my clinical practice when I was, tweaking it and creating that protocol. So we know it should work. And if it doesn't deliver within a few weeks, then we know we may not be dealing with EBV, or we're dealing with confounding factors. One of which mode is the Wi-Fi as well. Heavy metal toxicity, co-infections, all these can really mask the possible recovery. You have to look at the cells. Like, it can be murky waters. If it's EBV itself, it's pretty straightforward once you know.
Right. But it could be so many other things that contribute to it that could be happening as well. Like you said, heavy metal toxicity, all other environmental.
Yeah, because you think about it, 95% of us on the planet carries this virus. I'm 55.
Amazing.
I'm 55. I just tested first time in my life because I didn't have a need for it. Of course I have it. I was sure I had it in my system. I had antibodies because I'm sure I was exposed. It's not possible not to get exposed, But that's normal. We carry it, and there's no reason for it to reactivate.
Right.
Except with huge stress or environmental exposure like I had to the molds. And so I tested and I have a minimum positive, but it's just above the range. Like my early antigen is like, yeah, well, go figure. Yes, because I'm still struggling with this mold. We're still, it takes time, and it's stressful because we're selling a house and trying to buy a new one. And, it's always, It's a big stressor.
It is. That is huge.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh. Well, this was so amazing. So many pearls in here. How can people find you, or even if they wanted to work with you or know about you?
The best website is EBV Help, EBV HELP. Okay. We created this website. It should have everything, all things EBV. So if somebody is looking at if you forget about the labs and you want to cross-check, there's everything about the labs. There is a 50-minute Facebook Live recording where I'm with a whiteboard and we're talking about the labs and drawing colors. So it's very helpful for people. We have direct to consumer labs. Sometimes people don't have a doctor willing to test, and if they test,
amazing. Okay,
they don't test properly, and people pay money and spend time and waste their time and don't get the reading correctly, or the lab report is misinterpreted. Yeah, so we have there are direct to consumer labs that people don't know they have access to. So we connected with one. We have a button, and people can go and get the right lab right where they live. So we have different, we created resources. So no matter if people they have lupus, but they're not sure they have EBV, if it's pertinent, they can go into the quiz, and there's 4 pages of different symptoms, usual, unusual, all based on medical research, medical literature.
Right.
Check off your boxes. Oh, I had juvenile rheumatoid arthritis. I had no idea that it was connected to anything else when I was a kid. Well, there it is. it's like, oh, I'm very sensitive to mosquito bites. I get infected. Like, oh, I have low platelets constantly. I don't know why. Oh, it's like odd things. This virus shows in weird conditions. And so, so we have those, so there's free resources there. We have every 2 months or so, we run a 2-day live EBD transformational workshop.
Oh, amazing. Okay.
Yeah, it's $47.
Great.
And it's not so physical. It's about the emotional, the spiritual, the hurt. People are really hurting on a deeper level when they're so sick. They lost their dreams, they lost the bearings, and they're alone. They don't have a community. So this is just 2 hours, 2 days in a row. And after that, our coach takes over and we do a little 5-day free challenge in our Facebook group for that. So they can kind of anchor that workshop. So we do that, and if people return, because they can return again and again, it's like brushing teeth. It's just $1 to return. So we have that. Yeah, we have that.
When is that coming back up again?
That is actually next week on Thursday, and the first Thursday and Friday of November, we're running another one again.
Is it every 2 months?
It depends on my schedule, so we don't have it pre-scheduled for next year.
Okay.
I imagine February maybe.
It'll be on the
Health. If we running it, it should be there. There's challenges that we used to do live that are recorded. It's like $27. Introduction to EBD. And a core program is the EBD recovery program, which is about $1,500. And that's a whole A to Z, everything you need, all the complications, cofactors, supplements, diets, everything is lined up. And we have monthly live coaching calls with me. So I stay there as long as our students are asking questions. So it's like you get, and we have a vast library of these recordings. We always record them. So, if a person is ready, you have everything there. And it is a recovery process. Yeah.
Okay. Perfect.
Yeah. We have all that information is on EBD Health.
Okay. Kasia, thank you so much for this. It was so informative. Thank you for sharing your wisdom today and taking the time out to inform everyone that has lupus, anyone that has ever had Epstein Barr virus, and some of the things that they can do today to change the course of their lives, especially when it comes to Epstein Barr, especially if it's chronic. Yeah,
you don't have to suffer from lupus. You just have to figure out, your triggering events. Was it environmental toxins? Was it the ABV infection?
Exactly.
Was it just a very bad period in your life? Because that you can take care of yourself. You can have people, helping you like you, and just get out of that. Get out of that place.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Yes. Oh, anytime you need me, just let me know. I'll come back.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks so much, Kasia.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Alrighty. All right. Well, if you're interested in working with Kasia and joining her Epstein Barr recovery program, head on over to the show notes at margaretromero.com/episode 207 for all the information. And I've also included a discount. You can use the code Romero10 to get 10% off that amazing program. All right. Thank you so much for joining me this week, wherever you are in the world. Thank you so much. I hope you are well, you are happy, and you are healthy. I'll talk to you all next week. Bye for now.